We're learning Masechet Shabbat. We're on Daf 9 Amud Aleph, Daf 9 Amud Aleph. So in the Steinsaltz edition, it's on page 40, and we're simply reading and understanding, hopefully understanding. Talking about transferring from domain to domain. The Hebrew term is tiltul mirashut rabim lirashut yachid, mirashut lirashut. Rashut is a domain, and so let's get into it. Acherim omrim askupa meshemeshet shtei rashuyot. Acherim say, depending on the circumstances, a threshold serves as two domains. Acherim generally refers to Rebbe Meir. Why is he called Acherim? Because he had a teacher who got in big trouble. So, because of his closeness to the teacher, the Gemara didn't want to give him too much honor, I suppose. That's one reason. That's one possible answer. Rebbe Meir was a great Tana. Everybody respects him. But for some reason, just because of his closeness to one of the greatest Tanaim who became an Epicurus, heretic, so that very association caused it to be called Acherim. So Acherim say, depending on the circumstances, in other words, they don't mention his name, but they respect his views tremendously. So he's still Rebbe Meir was a very holy man, Rebbe Meir Balanes. So he was a miracle worker. So anyhow, if that is indeed Acherim, he said, depending on the circumstances, the threshold serves as two domains. Askupa meshemeshet shtei rashuyot. So the threshold of the door is two domains. When the entrance is open, the threshold is subsumed within the house, and it's considered to be a private domain. In the language, in the lashon, bizman shehapetach patuah kalafnim petach michutz naul kalachutz. When the door is closed, the threshold is like the public domain. So, the Gemara wonders whether the entrance is open. When the entrance is open, the threshold is considered to be like a private domain. Is this so even though it doesn't have a post on its side? There's the law of the lechi, of the post on its side, that has ramifications. Bahamar Rav Chama bar Guria Amar Rav Tocha Petach Tzarich Lechi Acher Lahatiro. Tocha Petach Tzarich Lechi Acher Lahatiro. Didn't Rav Chama bar Guria say that Rav said the opening, meaning the wall, the doorway, requires another post in order to permit carrying there? A symbolic partition must be established at the side of the opening for the doorway to be considered closed and render carrying within it permissible, like a full-fledged private domain. In the Tosefta, no mention was made of the need for this kind of a post. So what does that mean? And if you say that the Tosefta is referring to a threshold that does not have an area of 4x4 handbreadths, which is not considered an independent area, and therefore does not require a post. So, didn't Hamar Rav Chama bar Guria Marav Tocha Petach Afal Pi She'en Bo Arba Al Arba Tzarich Lechi Acher Latiro? So in such a case, didn't Rav Chama bar Guria say that Rav said explicitly the opening, even though it does not have an area of 4x4 handbreadths, still requires another post in order to permit carrying there? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Achav iskupat mavoy askina. Here we're dealing with the threshold of an alleyway, open to the public domain on only one side. According to the Torah law, it's considered like a private domain. The sages require him to establish a fourth symbolic partition on the side open to the public domain. The alleyway was covered, and this covering extended to part of the threshold in the manner that half of it is covered. Chetzio mukura v'chetzio she'enu mukura. That half of it is covered or roofed, and half of it is not covered. And the covering is over the part of the threshold towards the inside. In that case, if the entrance is open, its legal status is like that of the inside. And as it is considered as if there were a partition extending from the edge of the roofing above to below, based on the halachic principle, lower the partition. The opening of the alleyway is thereby sealed, rendering it a private domain. However, when the entrance is locked, the Gemara says, Petach patuach klifnim, petach na'ul klachutz. So if the entrance is open, its legal status is like that of the inside. But petach na'ul, if the entrance is locked, it is no longer possible to consider the covering as a partition. And therefore the part of the threshold that is beyond the locked door of the alleyway is considered like the outside. In other words, like the public domain. Rav Ashi Amar, Le'olam be'iskupat bayit askinan, we're always dealing with the case of the threshold of a house. Kagon she, in a special case, Kagon she kera bishte korot she'en bo arba ve'en bezo arba. It's in a case where, special case, special circumstance, a case where he covered the threshold with 2 beams. Furthermore, neither this beam is 4 handbreadths wide, nor is that beam 4 handbreadths wide. She'en bezo arba ve'en bezo arba. Ve'en ben zo lezo shlosha. So neither this one is 4 handbreadths wide, nor that one is 4 handbreadths wide, and there is not a gap of 3 handbreadths between this one and that one. V'delet ve'emsa, and there's a door in between them, between the 2 beams. Petach patuach klifnim, petach nahul klachutz. So when the entrance is open, since there's a space of less than 3 handbreadths between the beams, and based on the principles of lavud, any space less than 3 handbreadths is considered non-existent. So since there's a connection. And the 2 beams are considered to be one with 1 wide beam. It is considered as if there was a partition extending from the edge of the roofing above to below, based on the halachic principle, lower the partition. And the threshold is thereby sealed and considered a full-fledged private domain like the inside. So petach batuach klifnim, like the inside. However, when petach batuach, petach na'ul, when the entrance is locked, in such a case, klachutz, meaning the entrance is locked, the 2 beams do not join together to become one anymore. Since the door creates a separation between them and the outer beam, it is less than 4 handbreadths wide. It is not considered a roof from which a partition extends to the ground. And the area under the beam is considered to be a public domain like the outside. We continue. V'im hayta iskupa gavoa asara rechava arba'a harizul reshut latzma. So there's a quote of the Tosefta which says, if the threshold were 10 handbreadths high and 4 by 4 handbreadths wide, so it is an independent domain, even if it was inside a private domain. So the Gemara comments. Messiah le Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, Demar Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, Omer haya Rabbi Meir, Kol mekom she'eta motzei shte reshuyot, vehem reshut achat, kagon amud b'reshut yachid gavoa asara, rechav arba, asor lechataf alav, gezer mishum tel b'reshut rabim. That means, the statement of Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi is the following. What we just said is the support for the following statement of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbi Meir. Any place you find 2 domains, meaning 2 places, each of which is sufficiently distinct to be an independent domain, and even though they are halachically one domain, i.e. a case where a pillar that is 10 handbreadths high and 4 by 4 wide is standing in the private domain, even though the pillar is a private domain, based on its measurements, it is prohibited by rabbinic law to adjust a burden on one's shoulders upon it and lift an object from the ground of the private domain and place it atop the pillar, as the pillar is deemed by its measurements as an independent domain. It is prohibited by a decree issued by the sages due to a similar situation, the case of a mound of that size in the public domain. A tel b'rshut abim. Tel, like Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv means mound or hill of the spring, right? So here's a tel. It's like an archaeological site. It's also called a tel. But here it just means a mound. Similar situation of a tel b'rshut rabim. So in other words, in the public domain, lifting an object from the ground and placing it on the mound constitutes a violation of the Torah prohibition of carrying from the public domain to the private domain. Therefore, the sages prohibited placing an object on a pillar even inside the private domain. Let's look at this a little more closely. So, when we mentioned the Mavoy Shechetzu Makora, an alleyway where half of it is covered, when the door is open, so let's see if we can look at use the diagrams here. We're looking from above to an alleyway. Time to use the cigarette for Kedusha. This is a door. That's a door. This is a korah, a beam, going from one wall to the other wall. Down here, that line is a threshold at the bottom. This here is a shadow of a wall. So the explanation is like this. It's like this. When the door is open, as in the image below, the alleyway, which is a full-fledged private domain, let's look at the diagram again. Put my glasses on. When the door is open, as in the image below, the alleyway, which is a full-fledged private domain, as it is surrounded on three sides, 1, 2, 3, extends until the far edge of the beam. Which is the symbolic fourth partition. Where's the fourth partition? So 2 walls, threshold, and a beam. The beam is a symbolic partition. Right? The threshold beneath the beam here is then part of the private domain. However, when the door is closed, the door serves as the fourth partition, and in that case, the beam and the area beneath it are considered the private domain. This is the din of a mavoi shechetzo makora, an alleyway, half of which is covered. In this second case that we mentioned, in the case of iskupa b'shter korot, when you have a threshold with 2 beams, right? You're looking from above to an alleyway. You got 2 beams, 1, 2, right? When the door down here is open, and that door is open, sorry about the low-tech imaging, we're working on it. When the door is open, as in the image below, the 2 beams are considered attached. See, there's a little line here. It's not really any structure, it's just in the diagram, it's a line to say as if they're attached. They're considered attached when the door is open.
What makes them considered attached? The principle of lavud. A space less than 3 handbreadths is considered non-existent. That's lavud. The threshold, even though under the outer beam, is a private domain, based on the principle of the edge of the roof descends and seals, the threshold, even though it's under the outer beam, it's still a private domain, based on the principle the edge of the roof descends and seals. However, when the door is locked, there is only one beam less than 4 handbreadths wide outside, and the threshold under it does not have the legal status of a public domain. Okay. When we have a case, I'll get back to one more principle and then we're going to move on. When you have shtei reshut v'hen reshut achad, what do we say in the Gemara? In the last section that we read, the case, the opinion of Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbi Meir. That you see, we do say their name, Rabbi Meir. Obviously, sometimes we don't. So, kol makom she'atam motzei shtei reshuyot v'hen reshut achad. All the while, when you have 2 domains, and they are one domain, kagon, such as in this amud b'reshut yachid, such as when there's a pillar in the public domain that's certain dimensions, asur lekatefula. So what does that mean? Some explain that Rabbi Meir only established this principle in a domain that belongs to different people, and there's a private domain only as far as Shabbos is concerned. It constitutes 2 domains as far as transactions are concerned. He did not issue the decree in a private domain that belongs to one person. That's the opinion of the Rashba. Now we continue with the next Mishnah. Next Mishnah says, Lo yeshev adam lifnei hasafar samuch lemincha ad shitpalel lo yikanes adam lemerchatz v'lo levorzaki v'lo lechov v'lo ledin v'mitchilo ein mafsikin l'kror kriyat shema ve'en mafsikin l'tfilah. After having dealt with the limited and defined topics of the halachos of carrying and Shabbos, the Mishnah begins to deal with, there's a new Mishnah, the second Mishnah in the Masechet. It begins to deal with the halachot of Shabbos chronologically, beginning with the activities one may not perform on the onset of Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. With regard to one's daily conduct, the Mishnah said, Erev Shabbos means before sunset, right? From 12 to sunset, or some say all of Friday is Erev Shabbos. Okay, so it says, a person may not sit before the barber adjacent to the time of Mincha until he has recited the afternoon prayer, Mincha. Right? And a person may not enter the bathhouse and may not enter to work in a tannery called a borsaki. What's a borsaki exactly? A tannery, it's a borsaki. The fundamental origin of the word is from the Greek barsius, meaning one who processes hides. The word borsaki developed to mean a place where animal hides are tanned. As borsikos is the term for matters relating to tanning hides. It's a number of Greek words in the Talmud. Israel and Greece and Babylonia were all relatively close together. Not Lavud, but no. So, if Erev Shabbos you don't go to the bathhouse and you don't go to work in a tannery, and he may neither begin to eat a meal nor sit in judgment if he's a judge, or if somebody calls him up to decide a matter between 2 people. I guess that's considered a judge. And however, if they already began to engage in those activities, they need not stop and recite the Amidah prayer. The Tana articulated a principle. I mean, okay, if 2 people come to you and say, decide this for us,
and you have an easy answer, fine. But if it's a complex situation and the Chacham was deciding between the two, has to take a long time for it, it could get in the way of Shabbos. Shabbos is coming, got to hurry up. It's Thursday night now. Got to get ready for Shabbos. So if you had already started these activities, you don't need to stop and say the Amida prayer, according to the Mishnah. The Tana articulated a principle. One stops engaging in all of these activities to recite Shema, and one does not stop to recite the Amida prayer. This is all the halachot. We don't learn halacha from a Mishnah. We don't paskin halachas from the Mishnah. This is the Ikar Adin from the times of the Tanaim. It was a different world. They had Talmidei Chachamim who were actually learning night and day. They were mimitim et atzmam al Torah. The Torah. They were, so to speak, killing themselves in the Torah. They were putting their entire lifeblood into the Torah, and it was a different kind of limud. It wasn't just go to yeshiva, learn for 4 hours, learn for 8 hours, and go home. Actually, there might be one or two people in the whole generation who are on this level of the Talmid Chacham as described in this Mishnah. The Gemara. Hey, samuch lemincha. What is samuch adjacent to the afternoon prayer? Adjacent to mincha. Ilema lemincha gedola amai lo. If you say it's mincha gedola, then why not? In other words, why can't you stop? Why can't you do these activities? Mincha gedola is quite early in the afternoon. There's a few hours before he has a few hours to do things before he has to get ready for Shabbos, which might just take 1 hour. Okay, 1 hour before Shabbos, the minimum time you leave to get ready for Shabbos, right? Unless you have to cook and buy stuff and all of that. I'm just talking about getting the house ready and getting the last minute preparations for Shabbos ready. Cooking you do Thursday night if you're working on Friday, and or if you're Friday morning, according to the Arizal. Do everything you need to get ready for Shabbos you do on Friday. Personally, that's quite difficult for the modern life. So do Thursday night is like also considered Friday. Or some people, we'll get into this more later on. Some people start preparing for Shabbos in the middle of the week. Some people start preparing for Shabbos right after Havdalah. But let's get back to the Gemara. So Mincha Gedola, which begins approximately a half an hour afternoon, so you have the whole afternoon. So why should you have to stop? And Mincha Katana, which begins about 2.5 hours before sunset. So the Gemara elaborates, if you say that it's prohibited to perform all of these activities adjacent to Mincha Gedola, why not? It's just after high noon, half hour after high noon. Isn't there still much time remaining in the day? Rather, the Mishnah must be talking about samuch lemincha katana, 2.5 hours before sunset. You do not engage in any activity that would cause you to violate the Sabbath by being still doing all the preparations. In other words, you prepare cool, not in a rush, not in a it could cause problems in the house. And it could cause somebody to actually, not be ready for Shabbos. And the whole point is, once you're ready for Shabbos, you're free. You just relax. So it's very important. Reb Brandwein, Shlita, you should live long and be well. Stretner Rebbe said, you don't say, before, there's a custom of saying, Good Shabbos. The last time you see someone like Thursday or Friday morning, you say, you don't see them, hi in the street, hi, bye, and you're not going to see them probably until Shabbos, you say, Good Shabbos, right? So, Rabbi says, no, you say, a good Erev Shabbos. Have a good Erev Shabbos. Why? If you have a good Erev Shabbos and you prepare in the proper way, then Mimela, it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to have a good Shabbos. So back to the Gemara. Im itchilu ein mafsikin nemet tehevet yufta de Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Tamar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi kevan she'egia zman tfilat mincha asur adam sheyitzom klum kodim shepel tfilat mincha. So the Gemara asks, in that case, if they started, if they need not stop. Let us say that this will be a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who said once the time of the afternoon prayer has arrived, it is prohibited for a person to taste anything before he recites the afternoon prayer. The implication is that
even if one begins to eat, he must stop. Lo, leolam samuch lemincha gedola, v'tisporet ben el asa. And we're talking about a tisporet, a special kind of haircut called tisporet ben el asa. So, the statement of Rabbi Shmuel Levi is dealing with adjacent to Mincha Katana, approximately 2.5 hours before sunset. In response to the question, if the Mishnah means adjacent to Mincha Gedola, isn't there a significant time remaining in the day? So the Gemara explains that each of the activities enumerated in the Mishnah is performed in an especially time-consuming manner. All of these activities are time-consuming activities, right? Person may sit before the barber referring to the haircut of a ben al-asa. Haircut of ben al-asa, according to the Gemara, Nadarim, was similar to the one depicted in this photograph of a Roman statue. This is a Tisporet ben al-asa. Quite possibly the same kind of haircut is being referred to in our Gemara. It's according to what? What did I say? Nidarim. So, that took a long time, apparently. It was like a big hairdo, you know. So, when the Mishnah said a person struck with the bathhouse adjacent to the Mincha, was referring to all matters involved in visiting a bathhouse. It was a big deal to go to bathhouse back then. It was like we don't have bathhouses like we used to have them. Turkish bath, I don't know. Never actually been to a Turkish bath. There's a few in the area around here. Sounds like an interesting thing. It's not something I ever actually interested perhaps in seeing what it's like, but I don't have any Turkish friends. Well, anyhow, so not yet, at least. And anyhow, so Turkish bath, no, the bathhouse. It was a big deal. It wasn't not just washing; it was washing your hair, rinsing. It stays to sweat. You have to, take a good schwitz, and then somebody would scrape your back. It was a whole Megillah. And not entering the tannery adjacent to Mincha, there's a reference to a large tannery where there are many hides who require tanning. You must initiate the tanning process from the beginning. It's like a big factory job that you can't stop with, kind of thing. And also another reason was because it stinks. It was a very smelly activity, and you want to smell good before Shabbos. And you couldn't enter to eat. The references to a big meal, which lasts a long time. You don't make a big feast before in the afternoon on Shabbos. You have a little meal. There's a mitzvah to be hungry for the Shabbos meal. So if you need a little meal, it's not the end of the world. We don't fast into Shabbos. You have to eat or drink something on Friday, unless you're like 1 in a billion, and or unless you don't eat anyway or something like that. So and he may not enter in judgment refers to a judge. Not entering into judgment refers to a judge who enters at the beginning of the trial, and generally it will take a long time for the verdict is reached, like we already mentioned. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar le'olam b'tisporet dedan lechatchila. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov has a different opinion. He's saying, talking about an ordinary haircut. So where he says lechatchila amay lo yeshev ab initio, meaning at the outset. Why may he not sit before the barber adjacent to the time of Mincha? It'll take 20 minutes, big deal, right? Maybe a half an hour, tops. If he's a kashkashan, meaning a chatterbox, it might take a long time. Anyhow, but still, if it's a short haircut, what's the big deal? That's a decree. It's a gzera shema yishaver hazu.
Maybe it's a degree what sometimes they didn't have very good scissors back then. The scissors would break. He has to fix it. Something had happened. They didn't want to take that chance. We're Jews. We always don't take any chances. Kind of thing, check for glasses, wallet, keys. So. V'lo lemerchatz, and not entering the bathos, lahazia ba'alma. So when it says not to go into the bathos, you don't just go into the bathos to take a schwitz. You go into the bathos to take a bath, to take a mikveh, to get clean for Shabbos. Not just to sit in schwitz and chat with your friends. So some people, they go to the mikveh very fast. In and out. Rabbi Nachman Breslov used to go in and out. However, the Maggid of Chernobyl, they say every morning he used to be an hour in the mikveh, and he would accept pidyonis in the mikveh. If somebody wanted to give him a gift, there's the custom of giving a rebbe a pidyon. Apparently, it was a place where that's another story. So basically, but the halacha l'maaseh is you don't take a long time in the mikveh. 5-10 minutes, whatever, in the water. Some mikvahs, there's a sign on the top that says, just in and out. That's the custom, okay. Maybe there's a lot of people, big crowds. So what's, Ab initio, why can't he enter a bathhouse to sweat? It's not a big deal. Maybe he has all the time in the world, everything's ready for Shabbos. He wants to have a schwitz. Everything's ready already in the morning. Some people, 99.99% of people are not like this, but maybe he's one of these unusual people, again, everything is ready like by sunrise on Friday morning. So he could schwitz, big deal. So what's wrong with that? The sages say he could faint. Something if he spends too long in the sauna, it's everybody knows you can't spend too long in the sauna. It's written on the wall of every sauna. And the bathhouse, and then considerable amount of time would elapse, etc. And he shouldn't enter the tenor lo borsaki le'eyune ba'alma, just to examine the skins. He shouldn't enter the tenor, even if he just wants to look at the skins and go out, still he shouldn't do that. Why? Ab initio, why can't he go in? Because the lashon is l'chatchila ma'lo dilma hazeb seda bizvine umitrit. Perhaps he will see damage to his merchandise and become anxious. And come to restore his ruins. He's just coming to look at his tithes. Oh my gewalt, the tithe, we got to do this and that. Don't take a chance. Shabbos is more important than that. Shabbos is our whole life, right? It's without Shabbos, what would we be? Right? Some people do Shabbos all week. That's different. No. It says 6 days you should work, and on the 7th day you rested. That means 6 days work hard. Rest on the 7th day. Okay? Without that 7th day, and God rested, and Jews rest, we wouldn't have a Jewish people. So these are very important. That's why these issues are so important. And v'lo lechol bisudak tana. You shouldn't go in to eat the adjacent type of mincha. It's even a small meal. L'chatchila ma'lo, ab initio, why can't he? Dilma ate la'amshuche. Maybe he's going to have a small meal, but you know how people they eat a little bit and then they want some more and then they want some more. It's very normal. The person, I'm just going to have a little bit. I'm just going to have one cigarette and that's it. And then they have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, human nature. If a person really knows himself, etc. But the person can't be too sure of himself. Okay. So, he might extend the meal a long time, and he may not enter to sit in judgment adjacent to the time of mincha. The Mishnah is referring to even at the conclusion of the trial. V'lo din b'gemara din. Even at the end of the trial. What? It's just the end of the trial. It doesn't take an hour. So, l'chatchila amay ab initio, why may he not enter? Due to the concern that perhaps he'll find a reason. Dilma
due to the concern that perhaps Chazeh Tama v'Satar Dina, perhaps he'll find a reason contrary to what he originally thought, and he will overturn the verdict completely, necessitating the restart of the trial from the beginning. Just a little bit more. ממתי מתחיל תספורת? אמר רב דאבין, מי שיניח מאפורת של ספרין על ברכיו. We learned in the Mishnah that if he began one of the aforementioned activities, he started one of the aforementioned activities, a haircut, a bath, tannery, meal, and judgment. He is not required to stop. So the Gemara asks, from where is it considered the beginning of the haircut? Mishiyaniach ma'aforet shel saparin al birkav. That's the answer. Meaning Rav Avin said, from when he places the barber's wrap over his knees. Me'matai hitchilat merchatz. From where is the beginning of the bath? First, let's look at the halacha l'maaseh of from when it is considered the beginning of the haircut. Based on the Rambam in the Shulchan Aruch, says the following. The beginning of the haircut, this is a practical halacha that applies today. The beginning of the haircut is when he places the barber's cloth on his knees. The beginning of the bath is when he removes his outer garment, takes off his jacket, whatever. The beginning of the visit to the tannery is when he ties the apron between his shoulders, as tanners do. The beginning of the meal is when he washes his hands for the meal. For one who generally loosens his belt prior to a meal, which we don't do so much today, but they did it back then more. Take off your girdle, right? Big governor, you're wearing your girdle all the time. Loosen your girdle. Have a meal. So when one generally loosens his belt prior to the meal, it is when he loosens his belt, even if he has yet to wash his hands. So loosening the belt, you'd say it's washing the hands at the beginning of the meal. No. Getting ready, sitting down, setting the table, loosening your belts, that kind of stuff is the beginning of the meal. Okay, back to the Gemara. What did we just say? ממתי התחלת מרחץ אמר רב אבין שיערה מעפרתו המנו מי שערה מעפרתו המנו. Rav Avin said, from when is the beginning of entering the bathhouse? It's from the time he enters the bathhouse to bathe, then he removes his outer wrap. An outer wrap is arfarto, his outer wrap, with an ayin. His cloak. And from Mematai Hatzalat Borsaki, from when is the beginning of going to the tannery? Gemara says, Ben Mishe Yikshor Ben Ktefav. From when he ties the leather apron between his shoulders. That's according to the opinion of the Meiri. Mematai Hatzalat Achila. And from when is he considered the beginning of eating? Mishi Yitzol Yadav. From when he washes his hands. But according to Rabbi Chanina, Amar, Mishi Yatir Chagora, from when he loosens his belt. We're going to continue the next daf Mirz Hashem on Friday. Have a good Shabbos, good Erev Shabbos, and be well.